Works out. Alright, so today we're going to talk about launch vehicles and propulsion systems, some that are real and some that are only theoretical, which might generate some apps this year. It's sort of fun, the development of those for various reasons. I'll give you a heads up right now, I am not, as much as you would love to believe so, a rocket scientist. So if you have any highly technical questions, please save them for the end. I have some videos that I think will help you guys figure this out a little better than I can, although I will do my best. So, launch basics. So, in order to get a rocket into space, you have to do more than sort of just like toss it, cross your fingers, and hope for the best, right? You're going to need some pretty strong force to accomplish this gargantuan task, and the way to do this is a launch vehicle. So, basically, the rockets you see propelling things like satellites into space, those don't go to space, right? They kind of fall off and, things happen to them, and I'll explain that to you later, but you need those launch vehicles or else they're just not going to get there. So, they're also known as carrier rockets, which is pretty easy to remember because that's what they do. They are rockets that carry things. But I didn't include a definition. So, it's used to carry a payload into space, and a payload is basically just something like a satellite, a space shuttle, although they're discontinuing those. Anything else, like a spacecraft that you would need to take into space, that's a payload. And it's very important to understand that they have different weights, so they need different launch vehicles. Also, they can be suborbital or outside of the orbit. Does anyone know what suborbital means? Yeah. Literally, yeah. Essentially, it means that they don't need to achieve total escape velocity. They don't need to go all the way to space. They can just kind of be orbiting the Earth, pretty much in space, but not totally out there. And those suborbital launch vehicles are called sounding rockets. I don't know why, but they are. So if you come across that when you're cutting cards, that's what it is. So there are types of launch vehicles. There are expendable launch vehicles. Anyone know what expendable means? If someone is expendable or something? Replaceable. Replaceable. What? Replaceable? Well, yeah, they're replaceable. Not just that they are replaceable, they're in fact designed only to be used one time. So these launch vehicles are designed to be thrown away. That causes a variety of problems, as you might imagine. Cost-related problems, also problems with cleaning them up. They're sometimes made of toxic substances. So expendable launch vehicles, while they're really nice, because then we don't have to repair whatever burned up in the atmosphere, have their own associated sets of problems. They're also reusable launch vehicles, and these are mostly theoretical. We only have one reusable launch vehicle currently that ULA uses, and I'll talk about what it is. But these are problems because as great as they would be to sort of reduce, reuse, recycle, things get burned up, things get banged up when they fall off of rockets, and so we're still trying to kind of figure out how to do that. There are other characteristics, obviously, of launch vehicles. There's their capacity, which is how heavy of a thing, like a satellite, they can carry, and that means that they'll have to have more or less lift. There's also the number of stages, and there can be anywhere from 1 to 5. The highest they've ever done is 5. The stages are essentially that, have you ever seen a rocket lift off and then stuff starts falling off of it and you're like, oh, I hope that's not important? No? Basically, these things, the rocket starts out real heavy, and in order to maintain a constant lift force, it needs to get lighter or else it's going to start dragging down to Earth again. So things will fall off of it, and it will get smaller and smaller and smaller until just the payload is in space, which has no sort of launch vehicle of its own. But anyway, a 5-stage launch vehicle is designed to launch something really, really heavy, to maintain a constant lift with a heavy payload for a long time to get something into space, whereas the smaller one would be like a single stage. Now, interestingly, a lot of the innovations about launch vehicles occur in the lower launch stages because we can do different things with their propulsion at those levels because they don't need to propel into space. So we can do things like air engines, combustion engines that require things like oxygen. Those can happen at the lower launch stages, right, because they're still within the Earth's atmosphere. The tricky part is doing that at the later launch stages, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. But Also important, and something that I would suggest that you need to know who is launching these launch vehicles. And this is not an exhaustive list, but these to me seem to be some of the most important ones for understanding the topic. The European Space Agency, which is, of course, European, right? And composed of European nations, not all of them. I think Malta is making a big run to join right now. Fingers crossed. But also the United Launch Alliance, which is affiliated with the United States. The United Launch Alliance is not, it's private, right? It's not part of the government, it just works with the government. I'll explain that a little bit more, but the European Space Agency was established in 1975. Anyone good at math? How long ago was that?
A while ago.
Luke? Every time. How long? 36 years ago. So that's old, right? That's pretty old. That's like 2 or 3 of your lifespan. Right? So, it was established in 1975. It is intergovernmental, which means that a lot of the EU member states get a say in what the ESA does, and along those similar lines, it's dedicated obviously to the exploration of space, not so much commercial stuff, although, they do some of that, but it does a couple of things. It participates in the ISS, and you guys hopefully by now know what the ISS is. What is the ISS? Right. So they participate in the International Space Station and all the research that's done there, and this is the mechanism by which their astronauts do that. Also, they take part in some unmanned space exploration, which is basically just like rovers to other planets that don't have people in them, places like Mars, taking pictures, taking samples. They do telecom, which is probably one of the most boring things they do, which is just like communication satellites and GPS and all that good stuff, which I guess would be lost without because I have no sense of direction, but whatever. And they maintain a major spaceport, which sounds a lot cooler than really it is, because it's not actually in space, sadly. It's in Guyana, which is in South America, and the reason that they have it there is because of the proximity to the equator. So interestingly, their stuff is not even in Europe, but that's where their sort of center of command is, and that's a huge incentive for people to cooperate with them, because they have like a prime location to shoot things into space, right? Russia, not so much, right? Siberia, kind of like not great. It's kind of cold there, so I've been told. Sarah Palin says she can see it from her house. All right, more about the ESA. Their fleet includes a couple of launch vehicles. There's the Ariane 5, which was first launched in '96, failed miserably. But they fixed it up a little bit, and the first successful launch was in 1999, and it launched an SMM Newton satellite, which was basically, that satellite was used to detect X-ray emissions from the solar system, was used to study star-forming regions, investigate, galaxies being born, which is pretty interesting stuff. And also, just put this in your pocket for later in the lecture, to study the environment of supermassive black holes and dark matter. Does anyone know what dark matter is?
Stuff.
Luke.
Well, after the Big Bang, the rate at which the galaxy or the universe was expanding was increasing, and they think dark matter is what's propelled. It's increasing faster, which doesn't make sense because it should be getting slower as it spreads out, and dark matter is propelling it further.
Right. So dark matter has some properties of matter that we don't really understand because it doesn't behave in the ways that we think it should behave. And we don't even in fact know what it is. It's just when we measure the total matter of the universe, the calculations are off. So there's something we're not sure about, and we think it's dark matter. It's theoretical at this point. We have no idea what it is. But you should remember that when I talk about wormholes. We can talk about traveling through wormholes, which is actually awesome. All right. They also have the Soyuz 2, which, if you can't tell by the name, was designed by Russia. It is a medium payload launcher, so sort of medium heavy stuff. This is in charge of taking to space. And it was fairly recently brought into ESA service. The Russians had it for a while. They didn't really want to share. Understandable. But it was brought into ESA service in April 2010. Now, they have an agreement with the Russians to use the ESA. Or not the ESA. The ESA has an agreement with the Russians to use the Soyuz 2. And it benefits both of them, actually. It benefits the Russians because they get to access that sweet launch site close to the equator, which is much better than their launch sites that are in Siberia. They can double the payload because of the proximity to the equator, yeah.
Why does the launch site at the equator make a difference?
Well, it's just partially because of the climate and partially because of the way the atmosphere is. I don't know totally why. I just know that heavier payloads, the closer you are to the equator, the easier they are to launch, which is why our launch sites are at like Cape Canaveral, right, instead of like in Maine. But they can launch a heavier payload because they're there. Also, for the ESA, this is great because they didn't have to spend any money to develop it. They don't really have to spend much money to maintain it. And they get a medium payload launch vehicle with a great track record. The Soyuz 2 is really, really safe. And it's been time tested. So they have a lot of faith in it, which means that they're kind of trying to see if maybe they can use it for manned spaceflight. With some modifications, obviously can't do it right now, but because of the safety, that's really helpful. This also is a great place for Russia and the ESA to cooperate on technological innovation. Sometimes that goes better than others, but this is sort of a point of cooperation which you should be aware of when you're researching. And then there's finally the wimpiest and dinkiest of launch vehicles that the ESA has, which is the Vega. It is a small payload launch vehicle, so it can't really lift anything very heavy. Basically, it's helmed by Italy and their stellar space program. And they cover about 65% of the cost, so apparently they are hiding money somewhere. But also, it's a precision orbit device. And a precision orbit device, basically what it does is it's really actually hard to put something in a precise orbit around the Earth's atmosphere because a rocket is going really, really, really fast. It's never meant to reach escape velocity, right? It's never meant to leave totally the Earth's gravitational pull. So you have to place it at a very specific point within the Earth's rotation, sort of within the atmosphere, but a little bit outside it. So you have to go really, really fast, slow down very, very quickly, and then calculate to like the 1/1,000,000th of a point exactly how fast you need to be going to make sure that it starts orbiting exactly in that orbit. So, although this is kind of a dinky launch vehicle, the technology is really, really cool because the calculations being off even a little bit, then things go crazy and haywire. So it can also place multiple payloads into orbit. So you can put like 2 or 3 like satellites on it, send it up there, place them in various locations. So the Vega actually is kind of cool. I just, I don't know. I like lifting heavy stuff, I guess. Go Italy. All right. I say people in space because I don't like to use the terms manned and unmanned, but I haven't come up with a better one. So we're just going to say people in space. All right. So in June 2006, the ESA got $15 million for the Crew Space Transportation System, or the CSTS. And they were like, okay, this is going to be totally sweet. We're going to send people in space again. It's going to be awesome. Whatever, United States, we got this. They did not got this. But, yes, hard.
Was it $50 million or euros?
Euros.
Okay.
Which is, I guess, more. Horace, calculate the exchange rate and then tell me what it is. No?
I'm doing it.
Yeah, don't do it. That louder.
21.258 million.
Say that louder.
21.258 million.
Encyclopedia Horace, everybody. Thank you. So, that in dollars. But initially it was a joint venture with Russia. They were like, oh sweet, we're going to cooperate. It's going to be awesome. But the European support was just like, actually, instead of doing this, let's see if we can update our space ATVs, and that'll be awesome. ATVs, all-terrain vehicles. And Russia was just like, oh, we don't really feel like doing that. That's not really why we signed on to this. We have bigger and brighter ideas, and so they were like, all right, we'll do this PPTS thing, which is the Prospective Pilot Transport System, which Russia is now doing pretty much on their own. It's operated by Roscosmos, which is just a cool name. And basically what they're looking for is the correct vehicle at this point. So they think that they're going to use parts of the Soyuz 2. They're not sure really what they're going to do with it. Turns out it's expensive to go to space. And so this is a slow-going process, but it's something that the Russians are working on. Shades of 1960s, people. All right. So we also have the United Launch Alliance. The United Launch Alliance, or the ULA, which is basically the United States' answer to the ESA, sort of. except for it's private. It's a joint venture between two companies, Lockheed Martin